buttons now. They always want to explain it to me. And I say, just tell me what buttons to push and when to push them, and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to understand the technology, because the technology, again, is Justin Goodman, as we were talking earlier, it's one of those things. It's like, oh, I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
I know that sounds terrible, but it's,
No, hey,
but
I
it's
get it.
also true. It's not just it's more of an explanation. I know there's older people that are really, really good with technology.
Listen, you consider me a younger guy, but there's people half my age who know things about technology that are totally foreign to me now. So
I'll still remember, I'm talking with Justin Goodman with White Coat Waste Project. And I still remember, I can remember where I was, and this had to be, my God, I don't know, 15 years ago or more. And there was a young kid sitting at a place in downtown, and I see him with the drop menu from the top, like scrolling down. And I looked at my phone, and I asked him, his mom was there. I said, what do you, he said, oh, look. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't even know, that drop down that has all the recent things. So I learned from young people. I don't think I've learned anything about technology from people my age, but so be it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, whitecoatwaste.org, whitecoatwaste.org. Justin Goodman, I'm delighted to have you back on.
It's a pleasure, Louis.
So you've had a lot of always victories, tremendous victories. Tell me a little bit about the startup with White Coat Waste for new listeners, a little bit about the background.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks. So White Coat Waste Project is a nonprofit taxpayer watchdog group. I started here about 6 years ago. I was the first full-time employee. We now have about 15 employees. And we're a taxpayer watchdog group focused specifically on ending taxpayer-funded animal experiments, which cost Americans about $20 billion a year. That's 20 billion
folks,
with a B.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, 20 exactly. No. I mean, it warrants repeating many, many times. $20 billion of our tax money is wasted every year on painful, cruel, unnecessary animal experimentation that tortures animals and does not improve human health. And our organization is dedicated to a system we call our system FED, finding, exposing, and defunding taxpayer-funded animal experiments. And these are experiments funded by the National Institutes of Health on dogs and monkeys, experiments being funded by other agencies like the EPA, forcing mice and rats to inhale things like diesel exhaust, stupid experiments at the National Science Foundation, like forcing animals like shrimp and turtles to run on treadmills. So the experiments that we're being forced to pay for on animals really range from the silly to the sadistic.
And don't translate again to progress. I mean, I know the experimenters and those are making an awful lot of money, employing an awful lot of people, but it doesn't translate. And I remember, I'm not connecting the two organizations, folks from PETA years ago talking about how 90+% of drug tests on animals do not translate to humans any more than if they did, a flea thing on humans, it probably wouldn't translate to dogs. It's like, so this was tested on what, on a rabbit, and when you think about it, it's insane. On the surface, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, you think about in 2022, we're carrying some of the most powerful computers we've ever dealt with in our pocket. And we can do tremendous things with technology. And there's technology now that exists in the field of medicine, things like organs on a chip, where they build a miniature human organ out of human cells and they can model diseases and test drugs. And they're more accurate than forcing a dog to swallow an experimental drug or injecting something into a monkey. And the National Institutes of Health, which is a federal agency, it's the single largest funder of animal experimentation in the world. The National Institutes of Health, while it spends about half of its $40 billion budget on animal experiments, it estimates that 47% of all the research it funds involves animal experimentation. So you have the leading funder of animal experiments in the world admitting on its website that 90% of the drugs that pass animal tests fail in humans because the drugs don't work or they're dangerous. And that's where the waste part of our name comes in. So the White Coat Waste Project, white coat is a reference to the experimenters wearing white coats. And then the waste part is exactly what you mentioned, Louis, is the fact that tax dollars are being wasted, animals' lives are being wasted, time, an enormous amount of time, years and decades of time are being wasted on these dead-end experiments that are not improving human health, but they're making bureaucrats in the government and white coats at colleges and universities incredibly wealthy.
And that is just bizarre to me. Again, it's tax dollars. I know you said I'm repeating it, but it's tax dollars. These are your tax dollars spent for a hell and torture of the animals and just wasted tax dollars. So however you want to look at it, or both, the fact that some people may say, well, if it helps humans, and I disagree with that, yet, okay, but it doesn't.
That's right. And a majority of the public agrees. If you look at certainly we do lots of internal polling. We field national polls every month looking at different questions, different animal testing issues. A majority of the public, whether you're looking at our polls or polls by organizations like Pew Research, who are independent, well-respected, show that a majority of the public, a majority of taxpayers oppose animal experiments, yet we're being forced to pay for it. And that's where we come in, is we're trying to cut the funding on behalf of taxpayers, on behalf of animals, because taxpayers, we believe, should not be forced to pay for animal experimentation that's wasteful and that most people oppose. So our challenge to the experimenters, which is a little different than other organizations' approach to this, is take the federal money out of the equation, because the federal government is funding about 2/3 of all animal testing in the United States. So the overwhelming majority of animal testing in the US is funded by our tax dollars. Take that out of the equation. And if you're an individual who supports animal testing and you want to fund it, there's plenty of charities that would happily take your money and fund animal experimentation. But you can choose to do that if you want to. But right now what's happening is Uncle Sam, people like Anthony Fauci at the National Institutes of Health, who might be responsible for funding more animal experimentation than any other single individual in the government. Right now, they're forcing us to pay for something we don't like, we don't want, and we don't need.
Wonderful. Justin Goodman from whitecoatwaste.org, White Coat Waste Project, online at whitecoatwaste.org. We've got links up at Louis B. Free, Louis Free Show, and WFMJ. I have to remember that the young techies that I always refer to. So
people can find us on social media at White Coat Waste at all of the platforms, whether it's, I'm gonna have to remember all the platforms now: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're all over the place at White Coat Waste.
That's wonderful, and lots of information there at the site. So let's talk about. You want to start about the success with the Beaglegate?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Please
Thank you.
Us. Great success.
Yeah. So last year we launched a campaign that went viral called Beaglegate. And Beaglegate was focused on exposing and ending experiments being funded by Anthony Fauci's division at the National Institutes of Health, which is the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID. So I'll say NIAID for short, so we don't have all of that word salad there. So Fauci's NIAID was funding horrible experiments on dogs, and we exposed a series of them, I think 7 to date. Things that included experiments in Tunisia where they were sedating dogs and infesting them with flies, locking them in cages outside overnight so they'd be infested with flies. Experiments in which they were being force-fed experimental drugs for months on end in tests for new treatments. And they were using puppies, 6-month-old puppies, and cutting out their vocal cords so they couldn't bark in the laboratory. We exposed experiments being funded by NIAID at Kansas State University, where they're infesting beagle puppies with hundreds of ticks and then killing the dogs and using ticks in other experiments. And then most recently, we exposed a series of 5 new experiments that Fauci's division at NIH was planning to fund at a cost of $1.8 million to taxpayers, where they were testing a new treatment for hay fever, so seasonal allergies. And they were going to do this in 5 different tests on beagles as young as 6 months old, where they're going to be force feeding them and forcing them to inhale this new experimental drug. And we obtained documents through the Freedom of Information Act exposing those tests, but also showing that these tests were unnecessary, that the use of dogs was completely unnecessary, but was being planned anyway. So we did a big expose. It went wild in the media. And then we worked with Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, who's one of our waste warriors. We've repeatedly given her awards for her outstanding work to expose wasteful spending on animal experiments in the government. She wrote a letter to Anthony Fauci, basically demanding answers about why he was going to be funding these unnecessary dog tests with tax dollars. And lo and behold, he responded and said, I'm writing to confirm that we've decided to cancel these tests, these 5 tests on dogs that we're going to cost taxpayers $1.8 million. These dogs are going to be tortured and killed for no reason in tests that, as you mentioned earlier, fail 90% of the time. And thankfully, taxpayers are being saved. Their hard-earned money is being saved. Puppies' lives are being saved. Public health is being improved. It's really a win-win for everyone.
And interesting that how you are able to, how that people in government, that people in Congress, et cetera, are open to hearing it. I love that, how you're able to contact them and they're open enough. Some are open enough to listen and act.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and we're incredibly grateful for the support of members of Congress across the aisle. I mean, they have very obviously their dockets full with issues that constituents and advocacy groups and other members of Congress are that are coming across their desk. Their attention is split a million different ways. And we're so grateful that we were able to get this issue on their radar and get them engaged and taking action and making it a priority. And, people don't have to, on the Fauci stuff in particular, we have support from Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill. No matter how you feel about Fauci on other issues, whether it's vaccines or masks or COVID response or whatever the case may be, reasonable people on both sides of the aisle can agree that taxpayer dollars should not be spent to torture puppies. So even though we have people with disparate interests, disparate opinions on Anthony Fauci, disparate opinions on all kinds of things, we're able, we're incredibly proud of this, because this is why our organization exists, to unite people across the political spectrum to take action to save animals and save taxpayer dollars. And that's something we think everyone should agree about, and an increasing number of people do, and including folks on Capitol Hill.
And that's wonderful, Justin Goodman, because again, when you say across the aisle, that's how our government is supposed to work. It shouldn't be polarized on every issue. Well, if that side likes that issue, then I've got to dislike it. It's about people, not parties. So I always say it's about we the people, not the parties. And
that's exactly right.
I'm delighted, Justin, that they're open enough to hear that. Keep saying that. The magic of White Coat Waste Project and the ability to do that, I think is fantastic. I know is fantastic. And again, all the
this issue was, this is an old issue. We've taken an old issue and reframed it in a new way. Animal experimentation is a 2,000-year-old issue, really. In the U.S., the movement to stop animal testing began in the 1800s. So it's an old issue, but it became politicized unnecessarily. It became a thing that was seen as a left-wing issue, a furry, kind of liberal thing. When actually, when you start looking at the cause of the problem, Uncle Sam is the biggest culprit. And if you're skeptical of government in other areas of life, then you should also be skeptical of government when it comes to how they're, how taxpayer dollars are being spent and how animals are being treated. And that's what we've been able to do, is galvanize support from people in the center and the right who typically saw this as a left-wing issue, help them understand that this is something people in the center right should be concerned about, whether they care about animals or wasteful government spending.
Or both.
Or both. Exactly, Louis, or both. And it turns out there's a lot of people who care about both. We're a country of dog lovers, where, the country is pretty much, has been for a long time, pretty much split 50-50 politically. And this is an issue that appeals to everyone, no matter what your interests are. And we've stripped away the partisan nonsense that surrounded the issue for too long, and have been able to bring people together and bring people who are hostile towards these issues along as leaders now on these issues. And, I was talking I was listening to an interview the other day with Congresswoman Dina Titus, a Democrat from Nevada, from Las Vegas. She was talking about some of the work we've been doing together, which you and I could talk about in a little bit. But she was talking about our work to end dog and cat testing at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and said the same thing. She said, I'm working with Congressman Brian Mast, Republican from Florida, on this issue. I don't think we would ever, and she said, I don't think we would ever vote together on anything. But here's one area where we do agree, we can agree, we do agree, and we're working together to do something about it.
And if that was all they agreed on and worked together on, that would be great. I mean, that would be okay. Yet now the door's open. And that now it's like, well, I think they'll at least listen to each other, where they may have just, well, you like that, I can't like that. You're for that, I'm against that. Now, because they've come together on the issue of taxpayer-funded horrific animal experimentation, now they can, it opens the door for hopefully other collaborations that they can get involved with. And again,
absolutely,
Justin, people that I've spoken with, I'll tell them about some of the experiments that are happening, and they'll be horrified. I said, well, remember, you're paying for it, you're funding it, and if you're horrified, you need to go to whitecoatwaste.org and get involved. I'm serious. I mean, because people, I think when you describe these let me rephrase that. I hope that when you describe these experiments that 99% of the people are going to be horrified. There may be that evil 1% that somehow gets joy out. I don't know. Schadenfreude, they enjoy the suffering of others. But when they find out that it's their dollars, I say, you're paying for it. It's like, what? Well, these experiments are taxpayer funded. That's when people really flip out.
That's right. Yeah, people didn't realize. I mean, for so long, I've been doing this since, I've basically been doing full-time work to end animal experimentation since 2005.
Wow.
It's almost 20 years, 17 years.
Yeah.
And even now I find, certainly it's changed over the past few years as a result of the work we're doing, and I'm really proud of that. But I still find a lot of people think, cosmetics companies are the problem, drug companies are the problem.
Right, yeah.
And, cosmetics testing on animals is basically non-existent now. Drug companies do most of their animal testing because the government forces them to, not because they want to and they think it's the best science. They actually think it's a waste of time and a waste of money, and it costs them a lot, and it sends them down dead ends and misleads them all the time and wastes billions of dollars on drugs that never should have advanced. And the common denominator when it comes to animal testing, turns out in most cases, it's the government. And so you can't boycott, unless you want to go to jail for not paying your taxes, you can't really boycott the government. So what we do is we come in and we give people other ways where they can, take action and speak up and join the war on waste and get the government to stop wasting their money. So, we have big advocacy campaigns where we're encouraging our members to tweet at members of Congress, make phone calls, send emails, show up to town hall meetings, call in to telephone town halls, make their voices heard. And there's really so many things that people can do to make their voices heard and take action against taxpayer-funded animal experiments, with beyond just, boycotting a product, because boycott here doesn't work. But members of Congress listen to what their constituents have to say. If enough of them think, if they're making enough phone calls and emails, which we see time and again is happening, you're going to get that issue on the radar.
And social media posting. I'm sorry.
And social media. No, that's exactly right. I mean, social media is such an important tool to get the attention of members of Congress who otherwise it might have, be difficult to get access to. So, social media, it's a blessing and a curse, I think, for most people.
I agree.
But certainly for animals in taxpayer-funded labs, it is a gift that allows us to amplify our message far and wide to tens, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world who have a stake in this. Certainly 300 million plus Americans should, have a way to contact their government and say they don't want to be forced to pay for dog torture. And we're here to be the home for them to do that. And, we're really proud in it, in addition to Beaglegate victory we recently had about against those tests on puppies with Senator Ernst. We've had a lot of victories in the war on waste in the past couple of months as we've worked on the federal spending bills for next year. So one of the things I think you and I have spoken about previously is the fact that so much taxpayer money from the National Institutes of Health is being sent to foreign countries for animal testing. And kind of the poster child for that, for the last couple of years at least, has been the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where the FBI and many others think the COVID pandemic started as a result of a lab leak. And we were the first to expose back in April 2020 how Anthony Fauci had funded dangerous coronavirus experiments on animals at the Wuhan Institute of Virology with US taxpayer dollars, that in which they were supercharged. They were taking coronaviruses from the wild in bats, supercharging them in this lab to make them more dangerous to human beings, and then injecting them into quote unquote humanized mice and seeing what would happen. And what happened is the viruses became thousands of times more deadly, killing animals. And again, the FBI and others believe that an accidental leak out of that lab is what caused the pandemic. As you might imagine, there's very little accountability and transparency about how our money is being spent, particularly in a country like China, where the government controls everything.
Yeah.
And they've completely obstructed any type of investigation into the lab by the WHO. Certainly, they're not going to let the US authorities in there. So we don't really know what happened. So we're shipping over tax dollars to these dangerous labs, and we have no idea what the hell is going on there.
Yeah. But you've also found victories. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we've had some victories. And I'll just give one other example of what's happening abroad. No, it's fine. We exposed a couple months ago that the NIH was also shipping tax dollars to a Kremlin-run lab in Russia, in St. Petersburg, where they were crippling and killing cats. And they sent over $500,000 there as recently as November 2021, so just a few months ago. So these are countries that the US government considers hostile nations, foreign adversaries, yet we are funneling our taxpayer dollars into their government labs. Again, and we don't know what's happening there. At the very least, animals are being tortured with tax dollars in foreign labs where there's very few protections for animals. At the worst, they're doing things like causing pandemics that are killing millions of people. And we have no control over what's happening there. So we were able to rally Democrats and Republicans in Congress to pass legislation through the House of Representatives that would completely defund, cut taxpayer funding for over 30 labs in Russia and China that are currently eligible to get US money for animal experimentation specifically. So this would cut off the Wuhan Institute. It would cut off this lab in Russia that was torturing cats, and it would cut off 30 other labs that the NIH has given permission to get taxpayer dollars for animal experiments. Yeah, so again, there's still some hurdles we have to jump over, have to get over to get this to the president's desk. The Senate still has to take action. But again, here's an issue where we were able to get people on the left and the right and the center to all come together and agree this should be a priority for Congress right now, is making sure our tax dollars are not going into labs in countries that don't have our best interest in mind, actually might even want to harm us.
Yeah, and but we have no idea. We're giving them money and have no idea what they're doing with it.
Yeah,
and where it goes.
So this legislation, exactly. So this legislation we were able to get through the House so far, or through the House Appropriations Committee, would prohibit tax dollars from going to labs in countries that are considered foreign adversaries, like these labs in China, like Russia, like places like North Korea and Iran, who are not currently getting money, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So that was one of our big victories in the spending bill so far. And again, we'll see what happens. We've started a campaign in 2016 to end the use of dogs and cats in experiments at the Department of Veterans Affairs. So the VA is another federal agency, spends lots of money on animal experiments. We exposed that they were doing some of the most painful experiments in the government on dogs and cats, including maximum pain experiments on dogs in which they were injecting latex into their arteries to give them heart attacks and then forcing them to run on treadmills. They were doing this to puppies. And we exposed these experiments. Louis, over the last 5 years, we have shut down nearly 90% of the painful testing on dogs at the VA as a result of our campaign, as a result of bipartisan leadership in Congress. And now we have passed language through the House of Representatives that would completely cut funding for any painful experiments on cats and dogs by the VA. So we're close to ending those projects through our grassroots campaign and congressional pressure. And this legislation, if it gets to the finish line, will completely cut the funding. But at the very least, what we've been able to do over the last few years is restrict funding to prevent new projects from starting up.
Which is absolutely fantastic. Again, you can get involved at whitecoatwaste.org. And as you say, nonprofit.
Yeah, nonprofit. We exist on many small dollar donations from regular folks across the country, around the world, even, who send $10, $20 in at a time, whatever they can.
Up, right?
And it adds up, exactly. And we have members around the country, around the world, who are very generous and make this work possible. We don't rely on big foundations for most of our funding. The overwhelming majority of our funding has come from small dollar donors who keep us going, grassroots activists who are taking, we have doers and donors. We have people who are writing checks. We have people who are sending a little scratch through PayPal. We have folks who are signing petitions, making phone calls. We accept any and all help. But yeah, we are a nonprofit, and we do exist on the generosity of compassionate people around the country who don't want to see their dollars spent torturing dogs in government labs.
So if you can, please do donate to whitecoatwaste.org. You can find more information at whitecoatwaste.org. Justin Goodman is my guest. Justin, just give me a second to ID. You're listening to Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, copyright Be Free Radio Limited, 2022, produced by the lovely Ms. Bunnyface in cooperation with White Rabbit Productions. I'm speaking again, as I said just before, if you're just joining us, with Justin Goodman from White Coat Waste Project. It's whitecoatwaste.org. I forgive me if I mentioned this before, but a weird thing, and maybe I should say this to you off air, but since someone very close to me says that my greatest asset is my greatest liability, there's no filter between my brain and my mouth. And she says, when you say that, don't you stop and think, maybe I should? I said, of course I think maybe I should. And then I go ahead and do it. Oh, well, there was a ProPublica where I've had guests on through my radio days for years. And they had a piece that ProPublica, 17th of August, 2020, posted at 1:55 p.m. I've got it right in front of me. Here are 6 accidents that the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill had with lab-created coronaviruses. And Justin, this freaked me out. That's why I keep a copy of it in my chaos here. And when I reached out, I freaked out. I reached out to them, and they said, well, we'll get back with you. We'll get back with you. They didn't get back with me. And again, these are people in their PR department that, I don't want to say know me, but they know I've had a lot of guests on with very positive experiences promoting their work. Didn't get back to me. Got back in touch with them. We're going to get back to you. We were just really busy. Didn't get back to me. Then when they did, they said, well, the reporters that wrote that are just not available. I mean, I said, I'm getting the brush, right? I'm getting brushed off here. You right? Oh, yeah. No, and never. And that freaked me out, because why wouldn't they, if you have a story like this and it's accurate, why wouldn't you want to talk about it? So I don't know what went on, but I found that very, very odd. If that happened in China or Russia, and there was a piece of media that, and I could see those governments shutting that down, or people saying, we really shouldn't go public with this. In the United States, an organization that relies on donations from people, it just freaked me out. It freaked me out.
Listen, we've been dealing with that over the last 2 years surrounding the lab leak. I think the article you mentioned might have been written by Allison Young.
Allison Young and Jessica Blake. Yeah.
Allison Young is fantastic investigative journalist, has been covering lab leaks and problems in government labs for decades. Really fantastic. If you could have her on this show, that would be amazing. She's very critical of labs doing dangerous experiments and the safety issues, the concurrent safety issues. I can always introduce you, but
if you could do that, I'd love that, because again, I'm getting blocked at the organization.
Oh, so yeah, to that point, I mean, we have been held up by places like the Washington Post, New York Times has covered us, USA Today,
major cable
alternate
networks.
on the major everywhere has covered our work over the last 6 years since I started in 2016. Science Magazine and Washington Post wrote about us as a picture of bipartisanship.
Beautiful.
Everyone loved our work, that we were bringing together the left and right to work on this issue. Then in April 2020, everything changed because we started talking about the lab leak and the possibility. So number one, the fact that the NIH had funded experiments at this lab in China, in Wuhan, these dangerous animal experiments. And number two, that the coronavirus might have come out of there. And in April 2020, that was not a popular idea. It was seen as a Trump conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Anyone who believed it was in that camp. And not only was it seen as a conspiracy theory, but it was actively being suppressed. So Facebook, Twitter, Google, we have dealt with censorship at all of these platforms, preventing our posts from being seen, putting up content warnings.
Excuse me, Justin.
Google locked us out of our account. We couldn't even run ads because they mentioned Fauci in the lab leak.
And again, prior to that, Facebook put a cover on it and said like inaccurate or false claims or something on that article by ProPublica, a liberal organization.
Because it was just because they, Fauci was being criticized, rightfully so, for, he's been a big champion of this type of dangerous research for a long time, despite criticism from other scientists saying it's not worth the risk, it's too dangerous to supercharge viruses and to see what happens and then screw with them in a lab. People have been saying that's it's an accident waiting to happen. So we've dealt with a lot of censorship over this and alienation, and it was frustrating, but it's been 2 years now. It's been over 2 years now, and the world has come around to the idea because there's no evidence that this actually came out of nature directly. Now, again, agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the WHO is even saying that the lab leak needs to be investigated after dismissing it a year ago, because it's the most likely explanation for what happened. Deborah Birx, one of the COVID response team members who worked closely with Fauci, just said the other day that this seemed like it was ready to go out of the box and that it might have come out of a lab. So the world has changed in the last 2 years, but we've dealt with a lot of censorship and criticism for our position on this because it was critical of the NIH, because it was critical of Fauci. But the truth is, lab accidents are common. Allison Young has written about this extensively, both in the article you mentioned at UNC with coronavirus and elsewhere. Lots of accidents inside US government labs. Many accidents don't go reported. They're not all causing pandemics, but they all have the potential to cause an outbreak. And if you look at the history of SARS, particularly in China, there were lots of SARS outbreaks in China. They came out of labs. The Chinese government covered them up. So why would this be any different? And why is the government so insistent on not letting any access and taking databases, the Chinese government taking databases offline, not letting access to the lab, disappearing data? It's very suspicious.
That we were funding.
Exactly, that we were funding. So we can't, unfortunately, we can't turn back the clock and take the money back and make sure that research didn't happen, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again, which is why we've been working on efforts to cut funding for the Wuhan lab, to cut funding from other labs in dangerous places like Russia and China, and to work with Congress to put guardrails on this type of dangerous research so taxpayers aren't funding their own demise. Under Obama and Biden, there was a pause on this dangerous, it's called gain of function research, this virus manipulation research. They paused it because it was so dangerous and they were concerned it could cause a pandemic. It was quietly started at Fauci's behest under the Trump administration, with apparently little or no input from the White House. And here we are. So yeah, I'm not surprised that you didn't get a response. The scientific community has circled the wagons on this issue because they're afraid of funding getting cut. They're concerned about losing their quote unquote academic freedom to do research that's way too dangerous and puts people's lives at risk. So instead, they've just tried to censor critics.
And again, in fairness, I was never able to reach Allison directly. the block wasn't from her. I want to be
Oh yeah,
clear
yeah. I
with
don't think
that.
so. She's a very
No, I want to be clear. I want to be
Yeah.
clear. But I was stopped at the PR department numerous
No,
times.
Allison Young is a well-respected, outstanding journalist who knows this issue almost better than anyone else, and has been very public about her work and her concerns about it. So yeah, I don't think she would do that.
Oh,
I have
no, I want to be clear. I want to be clear. It wasn't her.
Yeah.
It was
And
PR
I have to say,
people.
the University of North Carolina is closely involved with what's happening at Wuhan. There's an experimenter at the University of North Carolina named Ralph Barrick, who actually worked with the experimenters on Wuhan on these experiments that were then kind of offshored over to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The humanized mice they were using in the experiments were bred over at the University of North Carolina and then sent there. Some of the gain of function, these dangerous virus manipulation experiments, were done by the Wuhan lab in conjunction with the University of North Carolina. So it does not surprise me one bit that they may not want to, give you an opportunity to talk to to ask critical questions of people on their team.
And I wanted to support their work because Facebook, that was the first thing that happened. Facebook covered it and said false claims or whatever they do, false information or fact checked, and it was incorrect. What Facebook? I mean, ProPublica. I get it. I can get a little off in conspiracy theories. So, but this is obvious.
But I mean, listen, this is not
real.
This is real.
Theory.
There's no conspiracy. Yeah, there's no theory, and it's not. I mean, maybe there might be a conspiracy. I mean, based on the documents that have come out about how in early 2020, Fauci and colleagues privately were saying this might be a lab leak, and publicly were saying it's impossible. It's not a theory anymore. There was a conspiracy inside the NIH to hush this thing up and turn the attention towards wet markets and other places that the NIH had nothing to do with. There's a clear record of that now. So yes, conspiracy, yes, theory, no. It's a fact.
Yeah, it's a fact. And we know that now very, very, very clearly. I'm talking with Justin Goodman, White Coat Waste Project. It's whitecoatwaste.org. And please donate if you can. It's a nonprofit. And again, from people in this country, small donations, medium donations, and certainly large donations. And again, literally around the world, which is wonderful for the organization. When you think about some of the things that are going on. When you say that, even when I hear you said it a few times, humanized mice, that gives me chills. That sounds like an old, I don't know, 50s or 60s horror movie for me, where they had the giant rabbits, the one they had the giant tarantulas or whatever. You're too young to remember these. Some of them are black and white, but that's when I hear that humanized mice, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a plot from an old horror movie. It's humanized mice. Oh.
Yeah. And the humanized mice thing is interesting because that's an issue that's bridged animal people with pro-life people, which has been interesting for us to work on, and a great way to bring together two different communities, because a lot of these experiments with humanized mice involve taking fetal tissue from aborted fetuses and injecting it or implanting it into mice. We exposed experiments where they implanted fingers from aborted fetuses into mice and then did experiments on the mice, just all kinds of strange stuff. But so humanized mice, they're implanting parts of human tissues into mice to make their immune systems more human, so then they can do experiments on them. And that's what they did in Wuhan. They put human receptors into these mice so that their respiratory systems were more like human beings, and then infected them with these respiratory diseases like coronavirus, and passed them through it again and again to make the viruses evolve quickly, and then ended up with these very dangerous viruses that were killing mice left and right. There was apparently documents have come out now saying that there was a cover up by the lab to make the virus look not as dangerous as it was in the reports they were giving to the NIH, and that the concerns about lab safety were not properly reported on time. And I mean, stuff like it. There's going to be lots of books and a lot of movies made about this one day.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And
this is
where, for us, I mean, What we want people, the most important thing we want people to come away with from this is that taxpayer-funded animal experiments are at the very center of conversations about how the pandemic that has now killed millions of people started. It is very likely that reckless animal experiments in a foreign country that were being funded by Anthony Fauci and the National Institutes of Health and by taxpayers unwittingly might have caused a pandemic. And it could have been avoided because scientists have been warning for decades that this type of experimentation shouldn't happen because it's too dangerous. We went and outsourced it to Wuhan, and that's what it got us, a pandemic.
It's just, yeah, again, just absolutely horrific, absolutely horrific. And you think, again, that this is, regardless of how you feel about the animals, it's taxpayer funded. And the vast majority, like 90% or plus, I think, right, Justin, don't turn out to have a relevance to humans. Yet they're paying for it. They have been paying for it. Other than you exposing it and White Coat Waste Project exposing it. And again, the media, if you go to the website, whitecoatwaste.org, and you'll see all kinds of wonderful media for whatever reason, for whatever political reason, you know, because one side dislikes Fauci, the other side deifies him. Yet there's cross issues here that attract a lot of media attention, which is wonderful. Wonderful.
And
when I've seen you on the cable stations, I'm like, yay. You know, I let out a scream at first. If you come on, I was like, oh, there's Justin Goodman's on.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, listen, I talked to a lot of people, especially in the center right. It's a breath of fresh air for them because there was a lot of conservative leaning animal lovers who felt like they didn't have a home for a long time, that there wasn't an organization that more broadly represented their values. So even if they opposed certain types of cruelty, they didn't agree with the approach of some of the establishment groups, or they didn't like how partisan they were, or partisan seeming they were, or that the establishment groups have such a broad agenda that you feel like it's a litmus test, and if you don't agree with everything, you can't be part of the club. But at White Coat, there's no litmus test. You just have to agree with this, with us on this one issue. I don't care if you eat meat, hunt, wear fur on the weekend. That's not our issue. Those are issues that are deserving of conversation, of course.
Yes.
But the issue we care about and we're trying to unite people around is the one where we know people are on the same page and want to see change. And that's on this issue. There's more people opposed to animal testing than almost any other form of animal abuse. And we're trying to translate that public disdain into policy change.
And you do. And the success.
And we do.
You do. It's not, I mean, I know I don't want to say fight, the work continues because there's so much of it out there. We've had major successes. Any other, if you're good time-wise, any other recent successes you want to talk about, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I'll mention in the spending bills this year, you know, a few years ago, we exposed that the Department of Justice was spending taxpayer dollars on what's called live tissue training.
Yeah.
And this is something the DOD did for a long time. It scaled it back some, but the DOJ was hiring a company to stab, shoot, and blow up live animals to teach certain personnel at the Department of Justice, particularly at the FBI and the Marshal Service, how to treat traumatic wounds. So what they do is they take live animals, they maim them, and then crudely allow the staff, the medical staff at these agencies to sew them up, and then they kill the animals. What's funny, you know, it's not funny, but like the example of the NIH, while it spends $20 billion a year on animal testing and admits 90% of it fails, the DOJ is wasting money on this live tissue training, even though all the studies being funded by the Pentagon are showing that these human simulators that are like a full-size human mannequin that bleeds, breathes, yells, cries, can even
like
quote unquote die.
Like a human.
Yeah, they're computerized, they bleed, they can amputate the wounds, amputate limbs, have you treat with a tourniquet, all that. I've seen them in real life. I put on briefings for members of Congress on Capitol Hill where they've done demos of these things. All the studies show that those are better ways to teach people because you're actually learning how to treat human injuries, not a pig or a goat or a dog. So we've been working for a few years to shut down this practice at the DOJ. And thanks to some bipartisan leadership led by Democratic Congresswoman Madeline Dean from Pennsylvania, who's the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, she led an effort successfully to cut funding for live tissue training in the Department of Justice in this year's spending bill. So the DOJ, should this get to the president's desk, will not be able to spend taxpayer dollars on live tissue training, which is obviously cruel to animals and incredibly unnecessary and wasteful, and a worse way to train people. So if we want the DOJ to be properly trained in case there's an emergency and they need to treat a traumatic injury, you want someone who's trained on a human, not someone who practiced on a pig.
Right.
Certainly, if I had to choose, that's what I'd pick. And that's borne out by the research that's been the comparative research that's been done by the government with taxpayer dollars. So a lot of this is getting, a lot of this is honestly just getting the government to follow the research that the own research that it's done, right? Yeah, so
it works.
NIH says 90% of animal testing fails because it doesn't translate to humans. Then, let's have the way our money is being spent reflect that. Why waste that money? If the Pentagon's research is showing that live tissue training is wasteful and unnecessary, let's stop spending money on it. It's ineffective and inefficient. But you have, and again, that's where the waste comes in, and white coat waste. It's people have crowed about government waste for years, stupid examples. I mean, we've worked with Rand Paul and Joni Ernst, and former Senator Tom Coburn, lots of people exposing different wasteful government spending. And a lot of it's silly. A lot of the waste we hear about, like golden toilets or whatever other kind of nonsense you've heard about over the years. But when the waste involves torturing animals, that's what really captures the attention of the public. And because it's no longer innocent and it's no longer, taxpayers are always the victim, but when there's animal victims, that's a different story.
That's right. It raises it too much. Of course, no one wants their tax dollars wasted, spent on things that don't pan out for humans, et cetera. Yet, again, the animals are victimized. And again, 90% fail in human tests. So why would you? On both ends should be important to people, but even if it's the waste, people need to get involved with whitecoatwaste.org. Just if you got a couple more minutes, a little bit about how people can get involved. Donate, folks. Donate.
Certainly we accept all donations, as large as you suggest, or as small as people can make. Every penny counts. We're a small nonprofit, and we rely on them to keep the lights on and to keep people's paychecks coming and to, pay for everything that we need to do to run an organization like this that's making an impact on Capitol Hill, making an impact in media, and rallying the American public to take action. So donations are great. Whitecoatwaste.org, you can do that there. But in addition to that, going on social media at whitecoatwaste on all the platforms, there is where we're posting our most current updates on campaigns, our victories, our progress, ways for you to take action. We do things like tweet storms where we're asking millions of people to tweet at their members of Congress or key members of Congress to get an issue on the radar and amplify our message. This week, we've been asking people to call certain senators to make sure that the foreign lab defund and the VA dog and cat defund and this DOJ live tissue training language stays in these funding bills for next year through the Senate. So we're having call-in days. We ask people to, I just sent an email to my senator about this yesterday. So if you follow us on any of the social platforms, or if you donate, or if you sign up for our mailing list, there's going to be no shortage of ways for you to get involved and make your voice heard.
That's wonderful. You all do wonderful work. I'm so honored to be able to have you on as often as you're available, because it's so important. And I get great response because it just blows people's mind that why are we funding with tax dollars things that fail 9 out of 10 times in human, and of course, exposing the cruelty and the horror to the animals is bizarre. I've got to ask you one more quick question. How's your cat?
Oh, my cat is great. Mr. Little Jeans, our cat, is a Maine Coon rescue. We've had him since he was probably 10 weeks old. He just had his 19th birthday a month ago.
19.
Yeah. He just turned 19 and he's still going strong. He's a little, thinner than he used to be, but he looks big because he got a big furry coat. But yeah, he rules the roost around here. Has me up early every morning. Of course, we go outside. He loves going out in the yard and eating grass. And
is he a 4 a.m. alarm clock for you? Because
Yeah.
I'm
He's
always
in his old age. In his old age, he's become a 4 a.m. Alarm clock. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when I hear the cat making those horrible sounds, I keep thinking, don't get up and do anything, because you're showing her that if I come in the bedroom and yell loud enough or long enough, the old man will get up and do something, treats or feed me or whatever. Yet
He's got me trained.
I'm well trained. I cannot, as much, every day I think, don't do it. And then it's like, I got to do it.
If I don't get up when he starts making noise, he'll crawl up onto my chest
and
whap
whap
my face.
You're showing, for listeners, you're showing up.
Yeah,
He just gives you a little,
just batting my face. No claws out or anything. Just batting my face. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Let's go. It's time to get up. I'm hungry.
Dad.
Yep, exactly. So
so you do
Mr.
it.
Liturgy. Exactly. And I'm happy to do it. We love him so much.
I know you do.
19 years. I mean, how many people in your life do you spend that much time with, especially like with him every single day for almost 2 decades. So,
which is absolutely wonderful. That's it's great. And it's great that he's 19. Obviously you've cared for him very, very well. And I love that. One last, are you able to go back to sleep? Because you're young, you can generally, right?
Yeah,
when you
usually
get my
I can
age,
go back to
when
sleep.
I get my age, you get up at 3 or 4 in the morning. It's all over. That's it. There's seriously, I read about it. It's an old person thing. It's like, you're up. It's 3 o'clock. I'm up. I'm not going back to sleep. What do I want to do? Lay there and toss and turn and think, sleep. 4 a.m. done. Just can't do it. Just can't do it.
My wife, this is just funny. My wife is traveling this week, so I'm home with Mr. myself. And I discovered, this is a good trick for anyone out there who's dealing with what Louie and I are dealing with our tenacious cats, is I slept in a different room. Ooh. And he didn't bother me.
That's brilliant.
It's the bedroom. It's the bedroom that he he learned that the bedroom, if he scratches a door and comes up on the bed and does all the stuff in there, that I'll get up. But I slept in a different room this week and he didn't. He never found me. No, I woke up and he was still sleeping. I woke up at like a reasonable hour and he was still sleeping. So
that's
I might just have to mix it up and work my way around the house.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Maybe by the time you go back to the other room, he'll be, I don't know where he is. I'm going back to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, it doesn't matter. Forgive me for going on and on. It doesn't matter how much food you leave out or treats you leave out. It doesn't matter. They love that interaction. They love the interaction. It's sweet. And I think we had rescue rabbits for a few decades, and a lot of them at one time, and very well cared for, of course. They never came in and woke me up for food. But it's,
listen, I'm just happy to do it. This guy's lived till 19.
Oh yeah.
He can have what he wants when he wants it. You know what I mean? I want to be the guy who makes sure that he gets what he wants and he can have it, and he can have all the treats and all the food, and he's living the high life for as long as he can.
As he should.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that about you. I love that, Justin Goodman, about you also. One more time, donate at
whitecoatwaste.org and go to social at whitecoatwaste.
And get involved, please, folks. Justin, you're the best. I'm so grateful for the work that you all do and for you doing the gig with me, of course. So
anytime, really happy to be here. And we're so grateful for your support.
Thank you. When you say, anytime, you know what that means to me. I'll be reaching out soon.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
To go.
Justin, thank you so much. How wonderful is this young man, and the work that they do, folks, the work that they do is just absolutely so important. So I would urge you once again to please get involved at White Coat. Thanks. Project. Again, it's whitecoatwaste.org, and the social media, of course, as Justin said,